All right, so hi, my name is Hyunho, and I'm a master's student in Eve Team Visual Media Lab. For today's presentation, I'll be presenting a paper titled WALDO, Future Video Synthesis Using Object Layer Decomposition and Parametric Flow Prediction. It is about the frame prediction, and I guess to talk about it, I'll briefly cover what frame prediction is by starting from frame interpolation. So frame interpolation is a process of synthesizing in-between images from a given set of images. The technique is often used for a temporal upsampling to increase the refresh rate of videos by generating non-existing frame between two consecutive video frames or to create a slow motion effect. Here on the top row, we have 3 frames of horse riders, and when frame interpolation is performed, you now have more frames. And in a video, it would look like this. Left video is before the frame interpolation, and right video is the after the interpolation. Now you see the horse rider is moving faster. And now frame prediction, also known as frame extrapolation, is for all intents and purposes the same as interpolation. But instead of using multiple samples to produce an approximated intermediate sample inside that existing range, it uses that information to approximate a sample beyond the bound of the input sample used. So both interpolation and extrapolation are forms of estimation based on multiple input samples, but in a different use. So here in the figure, you have like a 7 input, and the output would be like a sequence of frames predicted from the motion predicted from the last input frame. So here we have a player ready to serve at the tennis, I guess, and he's about to throw the ball. And in the end of the input images, and the first one on the output image, he is now ready to throw the ball. And again, at the end, I guess he finished the serve. And however, predicting the unknown future is full of challenges due to the complex spatial temporal dynamics in the videos. To obtain satisfactory predictions, both the spatial appearance information and the temporal motion information need to be accurately captured. But especially when you attempt to predict the distant future, everything tends to degrade, especially the shape that's moving up. Degrades the shape of the moving object severely. So although there have been many studies on the video extrapolation in recent years, and to best of my knowledge, all of them suffer from the unsatisfactory image quality of the predicted frame, such as severe blurring, because it is difficult to predict the movement of the future pixels, especially with fast-changing frames. Here we have a figure of the same input, but from the different papers, and you see that there are severe distortion in the images, and you can barely recognize if there was a human in the after first of the output frames. And the other limitation for the frame prediction is that it is also computationally expensive. So the resolution of videos predicted by the approaches I found are mostly resolution limited. And there have been attempts to mitigate this constraint, and the paper I'll be talking about today is this. The title of the paper is WALDO, Future Video Synthesis Using Object Layer Decomposition and Parametric Flow Prediction. It isn't this WALDO, but it is an abbreviation for Warping Layer Decomposed Objects. And the project page is as follows. So here is the overview of the WALDO. The goal of WALDO, like similar to any other frame extrapolation papers, is to predict a certain number of frames into the future with given input frames. With given input video sequences and the associated semantic segmentation map and the optical flow maps are pre-processed by the of the shell method, and they are all fed for the inference. In a stage called layered video decomposition, or LVD, segmentation and flow maps are used to discover layer mask, segmenting individual objects from the background, and also discovers the control point, tracking the spatial deformation of layers through time. Semantic and motion cues are also combined to gather layer-specific knowledge like shape and semantics. And moving on to the next stage called future layer prediction stage, the layer features and past position of control points are encoded in the form of layer features to predict the position of the control points for the future frames. Geometric transformation technique called thin plate spline, which I will not go over in this presentation. The thin plate spline deformation model is used to warp input frames and the object mask, and merge the corresponding regions and fill in the empty image parts by fusion and inpainting network. And after, there will be an output of the predicted frames. So to summarize it, individual images are decomposed into multiple layers, combining object mask and a small set of control points. The layer structure is shared across all frames in each video to build dense interframe connections. Complex emotions are modeled by combining parametric geometric transformation, again, TPS, or thin plate spline, associated with individual layers. And the video synthesis is broken down into discovering layers associated with past frames, which is labeled as layer video decomposition, predicting the corresponding transformation for upcoming ones, and warping the associated object regions accordingly, layered as future layer prediction. And lastly, filling the remaining image parts labeled as warping fusion and inpainting. As you can see, this approach can be broken down to these three major stages: layer video decomposition, future layer prediction, and warping fusion and inpainting. And to talk about each...
Is the number of future frames automatically determined by the system?
Oh no, it can be determined by the users.
Oh, so user provide the number of frames they like.
Oh, as for the input frame or the user frame?
Yes, so the future frame will be predicted by the system, but in this case, future frame have some number of frames, right? So
yes,
the number of frames will be determined by the system automatically, or the user have to provide this as input.
From my understanding, user can still input the number of frames they want. But
then if the user specify this input, for instance, this player is about to serve the ball, but then if the user specify too few number of frames, then will it still contain valid information?
Can you say that again? Like provide few frames as an input and then
too few frames as a number of input, number of frames. Then for instance, the player is about to serve, and then the future frames that will be predicted will contain the follow-up of the serving motion. But then the number of frames user provided is, if it is too small, then will it still try to predict the valid serve motion, remaining serve motion?
Well, in the later slides, I will show you the result videos that the author is claiming that they use 4 frames as input, and he predicted 10 future frames, and the result all seems promising. But like when I actually look at the code, and there was only a limited of data he provided as an input, and the demo input data, I could only use 20 frames. So I'm not really sure if his claim, I didn't have enough time to validate his claim as if few frames could still make a promising result, promising like future frames more
Yeah.
than the input frames, but at
Okay,
least
so
that's what he claims.
okay, so let's say to complete the serve motion, let's say we need 20 frames, for instance.
Mhm.
But then if the user specify the number of frame he expect is 10,
Mhm.
then will the system generate the complete remaining serving motion within 10 frames, or will it generate only part of the finishing serve motion?
That's the question. I am not really sure if the predicted will like actually finish the serve or like it will be in the intermediate process of the serve. Yeah,
Yeah, so,
I
so
don't
I,
think he really
yeah, I thought there's a
specified.
probably system has a way to
Mhm.
somehow determine the number of reasonable frames.
Uh-huh.
That was my initial thought, but then
Yeah.
you said that this is the user provided parameter.
Yeah.
So
I think he mentioned about the long-term prediction, like by running the code like in a auto-regressive way. So like he also showed a videos with a 50 frame predicted frames, which was on the urban scenes, not on the like a sports scenes. But at least on the urban scene, it looks promising. But yeah, I'm not really sure about what it will actually do in the human motions. But
okay,
at least he said that it is able to predict like a long-term prediction, but I'm not really sure if it is still valid, will be valid on the human motion.
okay,
All right, so moving on. So to talk about each stage in more detail, first in layered video decomposition or LVD stage, which is basically a stage to find the dynamic object in the given video. Where's the mouse? Okay. Input flow map F and segmentation map S are fed to a time-independent encoder implemented by a convolutional neural network, which outputs temporal feature maps Y. And Y subsequently is fed to a transformer to form a layer feature Z representing the background and the objects of the whole videos. From these layer features Z and temporal feature Y, the control points associated with moving objects in the video are predicted and positioned accordingly. Layer feature Z is further used to associate with the layers a soft mask and a semantic class, which are combined with the information of position to produce the layer mask segmenting the object from the background. These little white axis surrounding a soft mask of the object is a grid of the control point. And the figure on the left shows an example of grid of control point extracted from the object detected in the stage. And their structures, well, at least it says the structure how it you see how the structure changes from T to T plus 10 frames. And the figure shows that their structure adapts to fit the motions. Here is the visualization of layered video decomposition module. You see that the moving objects are all masked out, and you kind of see these floating points that are colored too. These red points are the control points, this red mask, and the sky blue points for the sky blue mask, and dark blue for dark blues, and so on. And the next stage is future layer prediction, which, as its name implies, is about predicting the new position of control points of layers in the target output frames. The past position of control points and the object-specific knowledge, like shape and semantic, in the form of layer features, are fed to a two-stage transformer to construct representation for the, say, K future frames by combining self-attention module applied to intermediate future representation and cross-attention module between the past and the future ones. The prediction of control points P associated with each layer in the K future time step does not output their position directly, but rather their displacement with respect to the P with subscript capital T, with capital T being the last known time step from the past context. On the right is the visualization of future layer prediction module, and you see these arrows in the video, and these arrows represent the motion vector between the predicted control points and the past ones overlaid over the ground truth videos. And the last stage is warping. Fusion and inpainting consist of warping input ones and filling in the empty image part. Using the corresponding offset between the control point of the last known step and the future ones, and a scene place spline deformation model to warp the input frames and the object mask, and merge the corresponding regions and fill in the empty image part. A fusion network is implemented by a UNet, and the inpainting network is from the disk paper mask-aware transformer for large world image inpainting. Again, here is the visualization of warping, fusion, and inpainting module. And here's the experiment detail. WALDO was trained on 2 urban dataset, cityscapes, which contains 2975, 30-frame video sequences for training, and 500 for testing. And Kitty dataset with a total of 156 longer video sequences with longer frames, approximately about 340 frames. It was also trained on non-rigid scenes from UCF Sports, and H3.6M consists of 6288 sequences and 73404 respectively for training, and 752, 8582 respectively for testing, with roughly 10 frames per sequence. The semantic and motion cues are extracted by using DeepLab V3 and Raft, and the evaluation metrics are as follows: SSIM, LPIPS, PSNR. On the evaluation, WALDO sets a new state-of-the-art on the 2 urban dataset. Qualitatively, when compared with latest methods like labeled as OMP, VPCL, VPVFI, and so on. These are the example of each method of the cityscape dataset, and it shows that WALDO successfully modeled the complex object like cars and bikes, and also the background motion with realistic and temporally coherent output, whereas other produces like a stationary and blurry videos, whereas in WALDO you see a clear road markings here. Quantitatively on cityscape, it yields better than 27% relative gain for LPIPS across all predicted frame windows, and a significant margin for K greater than 1 on SSIM and FVD. On Kitty, WALDO outperforms the prior methods too. And here's the evaluation of complex motions of non-rigid scenes from UCF Sports and H3.6M dataset. As you can see from the figure on the left, it successfully handled the variety of human activities such as weightlifting, doing gymnastics, and walk sideways or leaning forward. WALDO also yields much more realistic output by producing high-quality frames longer into the future, and with much less synthesis artifacts. Whereas in these other methods, you barely see a human anymore in the T+10 frames. And this is confirmed by quantitative evaluation on both datasets, with large relative improvements over the state-of-the-art ranging from 1 to 3 decibel in PSNR and 31 to 56% in LPIPS. And here is the result videos I talked about. This one is on the urban scene videos. It says there are like 10 future frames predicted from the 4 past ones. And the result videos are non-rigid scenes. Again, 10 future frames from the 4 past ones. Okay, so that's all I have for today's presentation. Do you guys have any questions?
Does this method produce a result based on the given video input only, or can it keep generating result based on the newly generated frames?
Oh, like I said, if you are to perform the long-term predictions, it performs in an auto-regressive way. So it performs like a 50 frames prediction. I think it kind of like goes way like say you predict 1 to 10 frames, and to predict it 11 to 20 frames, it has to be learned from the previous predicted frames. So yeah, it does use the previous predicted frames in terms of the long-term prediction.
So theoretically, it can do that given that it has semantic map and all these things provided.
Yes, that's at least what he claims. Yeah.
Okay.
I have one question
Yeah.
regarding some of the details.
Mhm.
I think I have missed it, but how many frames do you need the past video to generate the future 10 frames?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
How many frames, like how many past frames do you need to perform this method?
Well, he did not specifically specify that, but given the result, well, at least what he claims, he used the 4 input frames to predict the 10 frames. But when I actually, like I said, when I actually try the code, the demo data he gave was about like 20 input frames. So I felt there was a kind of discrepancy between that two. I'm not really sure like what would be the minimum requirement for this method. At least he didn't really exactly mention that on the paper.
Another question. So the task of future prediction is somewhat related to frame interpolation, in my opinion. So would this method be also applicable for frame interpolation?
Yeah. There was also a paper which I didn't watch. I just briefly mentioned on the beginning of the slide. Here on the list of the notable work, if you see the first one, the optimizing video prediction via video frame interpolation, it actually kind of used I didn't look into the detail, but it actually used a technique that is used similar to video frame interpolation. So yeah, I think there are definitely a link between those frame interpolation and the extrapolation. I think they also can be integrated together in a future research.
Thank you.
You did not explicitly talk about the limitation of this method.
Oh, I bet. Right.
Yeah. Do you remember any limitations the authors specified?
Oh, it was very short. Do you mind if I just read it out or?
Okay, so if you don't have any thing that
yeah.
you can
Yeah,
explain.
he did not provide like a figures related to it, but he just said that failure cases include objects moving in different directions, but merged into the same layer. So I guess some of the failure cases and the objects moved in a different direction as opposed to its intended direction. But yeah, he didn't add any figures or videos about it.
Okay.
I have a.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. You could go on first.
Oh, no, you first.
Sorry. Also, my question is basically related to the former answer of Hyunho, which is so
Huh?
then about the limitation. So if let's say if there's a sequence of video of ball bouncing to the wall from the wall, then if the previous frames are just about to hit the wall, and after frame would be like bouncing up against the wall, then if the provided video is just before hitting the wall, then the motion would generated by this method would just go through the wall or something. Is that what you mean about the limitation?
That is the question. Well, like I said, the limitation didn't clearly explain what specific situation it was talking about. So I'm not really sure about the case you just mentioned, but it is very possible that if only the frames of the balls about to hit the walls are given, then it's very well likely the ball might just well penetrate the wall.
Yeah, but I think that if two objects collide, that would probably a case of two different directions, right? And then merging onto the same layer. I think that's what it's trying to talk about. But anyways, I just like to ask, have you tried? Oh, I don't know if this was already asked, but have you tried like predicting for more than 10 frames? And if so, does it still like remain stable, I guess? Or does it like take longer to stay stable? Or sorry, does it take longer to break down or whatnot?
Well, personally, I didn't try that. But even for like a shorter frame prediction, say 10, if there is a the dynamic objects moving, like say, with the fast motion, it definitely starts to like degrade even in the short-term predictions. But in a scene where say the camera motion is slow and where the overall scene is relatively peaceful, then yeah, even in the long-term prediction, things stay pretty stable. Yeah, it really depends on like how fast things are changing in the videos.
Got it. Thank you.
This is just a thought of me. Like I haven't read much of a video prediction papers, but when I see all the results, it's not really that great in my opinion, like compared to the video generation method. So maybe like I'm not sure why it is harder for video generation, even though you have these not video generation, video prediction cases, because you can have like motion cue ahead of you, but video generation itself from like nothing, you have to generate motion and the content. So I'm not sure why there's a discrepancy between the video prediction and the video generation task these days. Do you have any thoughts on this?
My personal opinion, well, there are some of the research I bumped into the using like a video generation, like a diffusion model for video prediction task. It's only been like the paper I think the paper was published in this year, maybe. So I think it is starting to go into that direction as well. But like in my personal opinion, like when I read these papers regarding the frame extrapolation, the uses or the application that they use this frame extrapolation technique either like for the anomaly detection or the autonomous driving scenes. So I think generation, well, I don't know much about it, but it could be generated like a random scenes, I guess, in my opinion. So I guess it's less reliable than just say trying to predict the future frame based on the past known context.